reality? Is it a fixed, unchanging entity or a fluid, ever-morphing phenomenon? Philosophers have debated this for centuries. Heraclitus said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." He believed everything is in constant flux. On the flip side, Parmenides argued that change is an illusion and reality is one unchanging whole. So where does that leave us? In our everyday lives, reality seems stable. Your bed is your bed, right? But dive deeper into quantum mechanics and you'll find particles that exist in multiple states at once. So, is reality constant or ever-changing? Maybe it's both, or maybe it's something else entirely.
Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast. Today we are going to discuss the movie Groundhog Day and explore its deeper meaning through the idea of the three famous philosophers, Heraclitus, Parmenides, and Plato. So before we start, let me introduce our member. Here we have Cecily, Danaluen, Josinde, Stephanie, and me, Aumimia. So we will start with a quick summary of the movie, then dive into how each philosopher might interpret its plot and its main problem. To get us started, Cecily, could you elaborate a little bit about the Groundhog movie plot?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the movie plot in detail. Groundhog Day is a movie from 1993 directed by Harold Ramis and starring Bill Murray. It's considered one of the greatest comedy films, but it also has deeper philosophical themes. Let's take a closer look at the story and what makes Groundhog Day a timeless classic. The narrative centers around Phil Connors, a sardonic and self-centered meteorologist assigned to cover the yearly Groundhog Day ceremony in the small town of Punxsutawney. Despite his disdain for both the task and the town itself, Phil encounters an extraordinary situation. He becomes trapped in a temporarily anomaly, continually reliving the same day without any apparent means of breaking free. Regardless of his actions, including attempts at self-harm, behavioral adjustment, or unrestrained indulgence, he constantly wake up at 6 a.m. on February 2nd, effectively resetting the cycle. The story may seem like a simple, funny setup, but it's actually much more than that. The movie Groundhog Day is really about how the main character changes over time. At first, he uses the time loop for his own benefit, doing selfish things like tricking people, stealing, and taking advantage of knowing what will happen in the future. But eventually, he realizes that his actions don't make a difference and he starts asking himself deeper questions about life and its meaning. In the movie, there's a part where things get deep. The main character, Phil, realizes that all the money and fun in the world can't make him happy. He's stuck living the same day over and over, and he starts to see his own faults, like being self centered, bitter, and lonely. But then he starts to change. He learns new things like playing the piano and making sculptures out of ice, and he starts caring about people around him. The more he helps others, the more he feels like his life has a purpose. By the end of the movie, Phil goes from being all about himself to being someone who cares about others more than anything. What makes this movie so special? Well, it's a perfect mix of comedy, romance, fantasy, and even deep, meaningful storytelling. Not many movies can make you laugh while also making you think about life. It's a movie that everyone can relate to because it shows how we all feel stuck sometimes dealing with the same issues every day. Groundhog Day uses this idea to show that the true changes come from inside ourselves, not from what's happening around us. The movie explores the ideas of making up for past mistakes, dealing with the changes in life, and trying to be true to yourself. It raises the question, how do we find a purpose in a world that seems meaningless? And shows how the main character, Phil, changes as an example of how people can grow and become better through being humble, understanding others, and showing love. In short, Groundhog Day is more than just a movie about a guy stuck in a time loop. It's about finding yourself, changing for the better, and making up for past mistakes. The movie makes us think about our own lives, how we treat others, and how we can break free from the things holding us back. It's a movie that stays with you, reminding us that every day, even if it seems familiar, is a chance to become better. So that's my whole summary for the movie.
Wow, that's a really good rewind. Thank you, Cecily, for the great overview. Now let's dive into philosophical discussion. Thunder, you will explore the perspective of the Heraclitus. So, my first question is, does the movie challenge or align with the idea of the constant flux?
Thank you for the question. I think it does both. On one hand, Groundhog Day challenged the idea of constant flux because Fiona, the character in there, is stuck reliving the same day over and over, and there is no tomorrow, just the same today repeating endlessly, right? So at first, it seemed like nothing will ever change, and he is trapped in this loop. However, by the end of this movie, he finds a way out. He wakes up to the new tomorrow, and that moment proves that the constant repetition can eventually shift. What seemed like an unchanging cycle does, in fact, break, showing that change is possible, even in situations that feel hopelessly static. Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is that does film corner situation link to the idea that the reality is constantly in flux?
Yes, it does. When the same events keep happening on the same day, he begins to alter the outcomes. For example, he saves a boy falling from a tree and helps a man who is choking. So these changes prove that although the day is self-repeats, his action can reshape what happens. He initially believes that nothing can change, that he is stuck and everyone around is trapped. True. So, in line with Hercules' thinking, the field yesterday is not the same as the field today. He is continuously evolving. Like yesterday me is different from today me. Yep, so yeah, something like that.
Okay, that's a really good quote. So next question, does the movie align with the Heraclitus philosophy on embracing changes rather than resisting it?
Absolutely. His acceptance of this repetitive day, combined with his effort to make it better, mirrors Hercules' idea that we should engage with change, even if it's subtle or seem invisible at first. What initially appears to be the same old today is constantly shifting, especially when he himself becomes to evolve. By changing his behavior, like I said, he changed his experience of the war, and in the end breaks free of the cycle. So this genre shows that even in the most repetitive circumstances, there is room for transformation, aligned perfectly with Hercules' philosophy.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
that
my
is
answer.
very good, fantastic insights and analysis based on the Heraclitus philosophy. Sandra, thank you so much for the answering the question. So next we have Jonathan Dane who will discuss the Groundhog Day through the lens of the Parmenides with very interesting view about the reality and the changes. Joel, could you relate that to the film?
Absolutely. Unlike the previous philosophy, Heraclitus, so Parmenides' key ideas is that reality is not changing. What we perceive or change is just illusions. And even quote, what is one of his famous quote says, "What is." So it meaning that the true being is eternal and unchanging. Now, if we look back to the movie, we see Phil Connor who's stuck in an infinite loop, living the same day over and over again. So to some extent, this situation echoed the Parmenides belief in a reality that doesn't really change. Even though to Phil, it appeared like he is caught in a repeating cycle.
So my second question is, how does film experience of living the same day over and over again align with the Parmenides idea that change is just illusion?
Well, in the movie, we see Phil experience reflect his idea, the humanity, the idea that despite the appearance or reputations, the reality is still constant. Everything, even though what he does different things every day, but it's still the same thing, right? Every morning, it resets everything. So this humanity would argue that while Phil perceived time as moving forward, and he attempt to break free, uh, even though he is in the state of being doesn't truly change, which is of course reality. So each iteration of the day reinforced that nothing fundamentally alter his circumstances. But if we look at the Parmenides standpoint, time and change are just like illusions, right? So because for Parmenides, so experiences. So their journey looking was able to break free from the cycle that isn't changing every day, uh, is through transforming his internal understanding of life and his relation to the world, to the reality, and also to others, people around him. So this realization that he have is aligned, pretty much aligned with the Parmenides idea that wisdom comes from rational insight into the unchanging truth. Yes.
Great analysis. So would you say that the key to film breaking the cycle is less about the external changes and more about the internal realization?
Yeah, exactly. Is mirror Parmenides argument that the true knowledge come from reason, not from our senses, just like I mentioned. It will initially in the movie, Phil believe he can change his situation by simply manipulating his surrounding, doing bad things again and again, and changing what he does every day, each day. But nothing really happened. It's still constant. It's still the same things each day. But as he shifts his understanding that his action doesn't matter, but his perception and understanding of himself and about the reality from knowledge is what make him break free from that loop. So this is like the same thing that Parmenides is telling us, that the understanding the true nature of the reality beyond appearance and beyond our sensory experiences is the key to wisdom and the key to break free from anything. Yes.
Thank you, Joseph, for the perspective. So now we know what the Parmenides will interpret is flawed, different from the previous philosopher. So let's turn to Stephanie. So Stephanie, can you briefly tell us about the Plato belief in reality?
In short, Plato believes that there are two parts of reality: the ideal realm, where concepts take form, and the physical realm, where objects depend on the form to exist. In the case of humans, Plato believes that we are made of an ideal soul and a physical body.
Thank you for the summary. So now I'm curious, how does Plato philosophy apply to the movie, especially to a film and its situation?
Plato believes that the human soul is divided into three parts: reason, will, and appetite. In the scenes where Phil realizes that he can do anything and get away with his actions in a time loop, he decides to indulge in his desires and perform activities that include criminal activities. And it was his soul's appetite taking control, his desire to fulfill his ego as a fuel. After he realizes his shenanigans throughout the town couldn't satisfy his desires, he decides to pursue Rita and make her fall in love with him. He ensures that Rita will always be in his line of sight and learns about Rita throughout their interactions to apply it to his persona. His soul's will to control, choosing any means necessary in order for Phil to feel happy and in control of his life. In a later scene, Phil finally tells Rita about his predicament, deciding to reveal his soul to others. Rita gives advice to Phil to tell him to live in the moment. This allows his reason part of the soul to regain control and do good deeds for the town in the next iteration of the loop, which turns him into a new the limits of his powers along the way. The soul has achieved multiple forms, such as greed, desperation, selfishness, acceptance, justice, and beauty of the present. Phil's senses allows him to form opinions on the world, such as how he dislikes town and his lack of control over his own life.
I see. That's a quite interesting take analysis. So do you have a conclusion of the human nature based on the Plato philosophy in the movie?
Plato believes that for a soul to achieve harmony, the reason should be the one in charge of the other parts, garnering huge influence over them. Allowing appetite to be in control makes the soul greedy, such as when Phil tries to pursue Rita, or when Phil chooses to negatively influence the town, while allowing will to be in control makes the soul rash and hostile. The time loop alludes to how sometimes people felt stuck in their lives, doing the same routine over and over again, wishing for a change to happen to them. However, by confiding in someone you trust about your troubles, that person is able to know and help you get through it. Phil was able to get out of the time loop due to his deeper understanding of the treason part of the soul, thanks to Rita's advice. He realizes what he was lacking in his life and why he was dissatisfied with it. It shows that opinions of forms are always changing, thus allowing Phil to get out of the loop.
It is wonderful insight, Stephanie. So we have heard today, as you can see, Groundhog Day can be seen through many philosophical lens, each providing a different understanding of the film's deeper meaning. So thank you to Cecily, Diana Lane, Josinde, and Stephanie for bringing these ideas to life today. And thank you to all the listeners for joining us.